I'm about to tell you about the night that turned my idea of safety upside down. It begins with a sound so small it felt like a trick. Not a crash or shout, just a single floorboard groaning under a weight it shouldn't bear. I woke at 12:17 a.m. The red digits on the clock burned in the dark. Tina, my wife, slept beside me, chest rising and falling in that calm, steady rhythm that usually comforts me. But the stillness of our house had been cut. There it was again. A shuffle, a whisper of movement from downstairs. My body didn't react the way it used to when I was young and adrenaline shaped everything. Instead, something colder moved through me, like a stone dropping into a frozen lake. A quiet, sinking dread. I slipped out of bed without making a sound. Years of tiptoeing around a sleeping Max had turned me into a phantom in my own home. At the door I paused, feeling the doorknobs chill. I had no gun, no weapon except my hands and whatever I could think of in that moment. Max's room was at the far end of the hall. I eased the door open. Moonlight from the landing window painted the hallway in soft gray. Max's bedroom door was closed. Good. From the stairwell, a faint bluish glow drifted up, the halo of a phone screen. Someone was in the living room. The cold turned to heat. Something fierce and protective flared up inside me. This house was ours. My family asleep upstairs was my responsibility. Step by step, I went downstairs, praying the old floor wouldn't betray me. The glow moved around the room, pausing on the TV, wandering to the bookshelf, lingering on the mantel with our framed photos. This wasn't slick. A pro burglar would use a small flashlight and be gone. This felt sloppy, brazen, like confidence without caution. At the bottom step, he had his back to me. He was a kid, thin, hoodie up, dark clothes, a teenager who looked like he'd wandered out of a late-night video. He held Max's game console like he was weighing its value. A phone buzzed on the couch. The screen painted his face in blue. I stepped forward and grabbed his shoulder. He yelped, spun, and the console tumbled to the couch. The phone clattered to the rug. The light showed his face. I knew him. Kyle Carson. 3 houses down. 14, same year as Max. He didn't look frightened. He looked irritated, like I'd interrupted him on purpose. His voice was sharp with a confidence that didn't belong to a kid in the act of breaking into someone's home. "What are you doing?" he spat, trying to shrug free. I kept my voice low and tight. "What are you doing in my house, Kyle?" He smirked, the kind of smirk that should have been earned but never had been. "Just looking," he said. Then the words that reeked of entitlement. "I can go where I want." That line hit harder than a slap. I tightened my grip. He tried to shake free. A flash of real fear finally crossed his face. "No," I said, voice rough. "You can't." And then he said it. The phrase that shifted the whole night into a different kind of fight. "My mom runs the HOA. I can." For a beat, I just stared. He nodded toward our mantel like bylaws somehow unlocked doors. "We log every violation," he said, as if that excused trespass. "Notes don't open doors," I said. He dug at my fingers. The sleeve slid up and I saw the faint stamp on his hand. One of those arcade or party stamps that glowed under the phone's light. Not a mastermind. Kid. He muttered something about checking serial numbers and HOA rules. I told him that wasn't a rule, it was a lie. From upstairs, a floorboard in Max's room creaked. I moved to block the stairwell. Kyle's bravado flickered when he realized we had witnesses, and that the house was recorded. "Smile," I said, nodding at the ring cam. Tina's voice came from the landing, calm but worried. "Jake, is everything okay? Stay upstairs. Call 911. I whispered. Once she called, Kyle's face changed. The smirk fell away. He began to plead, not with me, but with the idea of his mother. "No, don't," he said. "My mom will kill me." When the police arrived, they acted with the steady professionalism missing from the intruder's demeanor. They cuffed him. He cried the kind of scared, raw tears a kid cries when he realizes his lifetime of untouchable rules just met reality. Because he was underage, the officers told us he'd be taken to juvenile intake. His mother, Karen Carson, would be called. I'd seen her in the neighborhood. Sharp suits, sharper eyes. The clipboard she always had like a scepter. She ran our homeowners association like a private fiefdom, and rumor had it people did what she wanted because she expected obedience. They processed the boy and released him to his parents later that night, pending a juvenile hearing. For a few hours the house felt like it belonged to us again. I locked the door and tried to breathe. But those words, "My mom runs the HOA," they stuck. They didn't land like an excuse. They landed like a threat. Morning arrived and the ordinary things that usually make mornings comfortable. Sunlight, birds, a neighbor rounding the corner. Felt thin. The glass of normal was cracked. Max came down with his cereal, shadows under his eyes. He'd heard the noise. We sat him down and explained, trying to be softer than we felt. "Kyle Carson broke in?" he asked. "Why?" He wanted to know. How do you answer that? How do you explain entitled malice to a boy who still believes the world is mostly good? "Some people make bad choices," I said, and the words felt useless. Max listened, and I watched something shift in him. Fear, yes, but also a small, hardening anger. The kid who shared a bus with Kyle now had to walk past him every day. Later, the day blurred into reports, photos, and phone calls. I documented every scuff, every displaced frame, every footprint like my old project manager instincts demanded it. Timelines matter. Paper trails matter. I had a feeling we'd need one. When Max came home that afternoon, he wasn't himself. He closed the door softly and went straight to his room. When I checked on him, he wouldn't meet my eyes. Dirt on his cheek, a tear in his sleeve. At the bus stop, Kyle had been there with two other boys. He shoved Max and called him names, screenshots and threats following. Tina moved like someone who knew the playbook. Her hands flew over the phone, screenshots, emails, backups, evidence sorted into a folder labeled plainly, evidence_Carson. She was calm and methodical while rage buzzed under my skin. We filed another police report. We told the officers about the messages, the shove, the video. We told them about the HOA line. I thought of Tommy across the street, a friendly man who probably saw something but would never cross Karen. That was the toxicity of power in a neighborhood, when one woman's influence made decent people look the other way. At dusk, I stood at the window and stared out at the cul-de-sac. The street lamps glowed like everything was fine. It wasn't. This had become a battlefield. My son had been pulled into a war he never asked for. And that's just where the story starts. They'd brought the fight to my family. They had put their hands on my son. The cold stone that had settled into my chest after the break-in melted into something else. A slow, steady furnace. I stared at the folder Tina had already started on our shared drive. It was almost empty. A handful of screenshots, the police report number. But I felt that chill certainty that some folders begin thin and end very, very full. They thought they could bully a child and intimidate a household into shutting up. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The question wasn't simply how far I'd go. The new question was, where do I start? The answer announced itself the next morning with a knock that rattled the bones of the house. Not a polite hello, but a militaristic series of thumps meant to demand attention and assert dominance. I checked the ring feed on my phone. There she was, Karen Carson, in a navy pantsuit so sharp it looked like armor, clutching a clipboard like a trophy. Her hair was pulled so tight it might have hurt. Her smile was thin and practiced and didn't reach those hard, flat eyes. Rage simmered in them. "I've got this," I told Tina. She planted herself by the window with her phone ready. She'd become my archivist warrior, calm and always recording. I opened the door and wore my most casual tone like a mask. "Good morning, Karen." "Mr. Miller," she said with that clinical smile. "I'm just doing my morning rounds, and I noticed some discrepancies with your property." She said nothing about her son, the break-in, the cuffed teen, the threats. She moved straight into her power move. Erase the reality she didn't like and impose a new one where she was judge, jury, and executioner. "Discrepancies?" I asked, careful to sound curious rather than angry. She produced her clipboard with theater-worthy precision and began her litany. "Your lawn." She tapped a page, voice buttery. "Article 4, Section B, grass should not exceed 3 inches. Yours is closer to 3.25. I blinked slowly and repeated, like I was solving a math problem, 3.25? Then she moved on, as if she were reading a script written to humiliate. Your trash receptacles were visible from the street until 7:03 a.m. Section 6, Paragraph C. Concealment by 7 a.m. sharp. Across the street Tommy's blinds twitched. I could tell he was watching. Karen lifted her voice, playing to an audience. Rules protect value, Mr. Miller. You mean your value, I said. She smiled sharper and slid closer, lowering her tone. Everyone's. Pay or life gets busy around here. Tina's phone recorded it all. The tiny ring camera on the eave caught the exchange. Karen noticed, and for the first time the practiced mask faltered. My calm was doing something to her. She jabbed again. Perhaps if you spent less time filing frivolous police reports, you'd be a better neighbor. There it was. My son and our broken-in house dismissed as petty complaints. My son was assaulted and threatened, I said, voice colder. Karen's face hardened. Max is a good boy, but easily influenced. He made a mistake. Kyle is a troubled child. Your son antagonizes him. She was spinning the story to suit her. The furnace in my gut threatened to roar. I clamped down and remembered the plan. Methodical, patient, document everything. Then she pointed at a new motion-activated porch light I'd installed 2 days after the break-in. That is not on the pre-approved fixtures list, she said, venom folding into honey. She thrust a sheet of fines at me. $500 for lawn, $200 for trash, $1,000 for the unapproved fixture, $1,700 total, payable within 30 days. It was extortion disguised as enforcement. I took the papers slowly, looked them over, and smiled the smallest, most controlled smile I could manage. Thank you, Karen. I'll file these appropriately. She wanted a meltdown. She wanted confrontation and fertilizer for rumor. Calm confused her. She tried persuasion with menace. You'd be wise to pay them, Jake. People who fight the HOA find things get difficult. Our security team, very effective, keeps an eye on compliance. Threat by euphemism. A family-run security shell nurturing fear. I nodded, closed the door, and let it click like a gunshot. Tina came to my side, phone still warm with the recording. I got it all, she said. Every word. The fines were absurd, but they were also a present. She'd handed me paper that would leave fingerprints. Paper trails point to people. The dining table became mission control. The fines were Exhibit A. My old project manager instincts kicked in. Spreadsheets, binders, timestamps. I opened our dusty HOA covenants binder and began to dissect her claims. Article 4, Section B. Grass must be neatly maintained. No specific height. Unenforceable. Found it and flagged it. Section 6, Paragraph C. Receptacles concealed by 7 a.m. But a 3-year-old addendum from the management company had moved the deadline to 8 a.m. I found the welcome packet, scanned it, and saved it. Obsolete rule. Flagged. The porch light? No pre-approved fixture list existed in the covenants. Architectural changes required board approval. Sure, with a 30-day review window. Instant fines were bogus. While I harvested paper, Tina dug into digital soil. The fine carried a security company name, Mapler Security Services, LLC. A state registry check showed a company formed 6 months earlier, P.O. Box address, no website, no footprint, essentially a shell. The registered agent. Frank Carson, a family tie. She was monetizing fear, paying family with HOA dues to flex power. The deeper cut arrived when Tina unearthed a past scandal. A woman with the maiden name Peterson ousted from an HOA presidency for financial mismanagement and hostile tactics. The pattern repeated. This wasn't neighborly nitpicking. It was practice. I needed proof beyond our story. I needed other witnesses. Every house on the cul-de-sac wore a black camera under the eaves, small sentries. I thought of our neighbor, Tommy, who watched but stayed small. I thought of the Wilsons next door, retirees with a garage camera that faced the side yard and my back door. I knocked. Mr. Wilson opened and listened. I asked for footage. He was scared, but he agreed. 20 minutes of scrolling later, we found it. 12:03 a.m. Kyle Carson at the Wilsons' sliding glass door, jiggling a handle, trying a window, then hopping the fence into my yard. It was not a prank. It was attempted burglary. I copied the file to a thumb drive and felt its weight like a key. I now had hard evidence. Video of Kyle prowling, copies of fraudulent fines, the Shell Security Company, and a pattern of aggressive HOA behavior. I had a dossier forming that would be hard to dismiss. But I also knew Karen would retaliate. She'd escalate. So I started planning a trap that would be legally airtight, something so concrete that the law would have to act. When I walked to the mailbox that afternoon, I noticed the flag down. Inside the slot, a grocery circular and a bill, and the envelope felt wrong. Small details were starting to stack into a picture, and I was eager to see where this trail would lead. The little flap on the mailbox hadn't sealed right. Not torn, not ripped, just nudged and resealed with care. It was the kind of handiwork that doesn't happen by accident. My chest jumped. They were rifling through my mail. They were looking for something: lawyer letters, court notices, anything that might reveal my next step. Tampering with U.S. mail is a federal crime. It was reckless, arrogant, and it opened an opportunity one couldn't ignore. I wasn't going to raise an alarm based on a sloppy seal. I needed proof, and not just proof that the envelope had been opened, but proof of who opened it. I wanted them caught in the act. That afternoon, I went to a craft store and picked up a tiny tube of transparent ultraviolet ink and a cheap blacklight keychain. The idea was almost absurd in its simplicity. A barely visible on the adhesive flap that would smear if the seal was broken and glow under black light. Invisible in daylight, impossible to hide under UV. I printed a fake letterhead from a fictional law firm and typed a short, ominous-sounding notice about pending property disputes. Boring enough to lure a busybody who wanted to know other people's business. With a toothpick, I placed the microscopic UV on the exact tip of the envelope's flap, sealed it, and set the bait. Next, I set a camera. An old motion-activated wildlife cam tucked in the dense laurel bush across the drive had a perfect line of sight to the mailbox. I positioned it, checked the memory card, and armed it. I waited until the carrier had cleared and then slipped the decoy into the box and raised the flag. The trap was live. The nervous energy all day was a tug at the edge of my skin. Every car that cruised by made me look up. Tommy waved while he watered his roses and joked about checking mailboxes. He already suspected something. I smiled back and kept my mouth closed. At about 3 p.m., I saw him, Kyle Carson, headphones in, trying to act casual while glancing toward my house. He walked past once, hesitated, turned, and came back. He lowered the flag, opened the box, rifled through the contents, and found the decoy. His eyes lit up. He slipped the envelope under his arm and headed home, and the bush camera ate it all. 10 minutes later, he returned, slipped the envelope back, and left. I waited another half hour to be sure, then walked out. The seal looked intact to the naked eye. I clicked on the black light in the laundry room. The UV dot wasn't a dot anymore. It had been smeared into a bright, greasy smear. Beside it glowed the faint oval of a thumbprint. The trap had worked. I grabbed the memory card, pulled it into my laptop, and watched the footage. Kyle approaching the mailbox, Kyle rifling the mail, Kyle pocketing the envelope, crystal clear. He'd committed a federal offense. This wasn't petty HOA posturing anymore. This was criminal conduct on multiple levels. The scale of what I'd caught changed everything. It meant the story wasn't just about bylaws and bully tactics. It was about a campaign of intimidation with criminal acts attached. Holding that thumb drive felt dangerous and empowering at once. I called the Detective Bureau's non-emergency line and asked for property crimes. A Detective Miller answered, an ironic name, he joked, and listened as I calmly walked him through the timeline: the break-in, the threats, the bogus fines, the Shell Security Company, the neighbor footage, and finally the mailbox trap. There was a pause when I mentioned the UV paint and the wildlife cam. Then he said, "You set a tamper trap?" With a tone that mixed disbelief and approval. He asked me to bring everything down to the station that afternoon. Detective Miller was a large, no-nonsense man with decades on the job in his eyes. He watched the videos, leafed through the binder of evidence. And when Kyle's face filled the screen committing a federal crime, he leaned back and whistled low. "This kid's fast-tracking to trouble," he muttered. "And his mother, she's not just a president of an HOA. She's using the association like a sword." He looked up the security company and found it thin on legitimacy. The name Frank Carson rang a bell, a minor history of violent incidents, none of which had stuck. The detective promised to loop in the U.S. Postal Inspection Service for the mail tampering and said he'd pursue the pattern of intimidation and potential fraud. But he was realistic. "We need something live," he told us. "Videos and files are great, but we need the next move on camera. If she sends her so-called security team tonight, do not call 911. Call me. Stall them. Keep them outside. Don't let them in. Tina, you stream everything to me. We'll be there." A few nights later, a shadow rolled up in the form of a white panel van. Two men in dark polos, one burly stranger, the other Frank Carson, marched up the drive. They banged on the door and announced a mandatory nighttime exterior inspection. Their logo was a cheap maple leaf with Mapler Crest Security under it. I followed instructions. I cracked the door, kept my foot behind it, and spoke through the gap while Tina streamed. Frank shoved his hand in and shoved me as he tried to bully his way into compliance. It was a shove that counted as assault. Then the sirens started as a soft, distant keening and ballooned into a wail that filled the cul-de-sac. Their faces shifted from cocky to pale. The trap we'd set, the detective waiting for an escalation, snapped shut. Officers converged. Detective Miller stepped out of an unmarked cruiser and walked toward them with a quiet authority. The live stream captured Frank's shove. The door camera played it back in real time. There was no ambiguity. Officers moved in and slapped handcuffs on both men. Karen's front door slammed open as the arrests were happening. She stormed out in a silk robe, furious and indignant. "That is my security team. I'm the HOA president," she shrieked. But the evidence, the videos, the witness statements, and Detective Miller's presence rewrote the scene in an instant. The evening that began with a tampered envelope ended with flashing lights, cuffs, and an unfolding criminal investigation. The neighborhood that had once been complacent now had a visible fracture, and the quiet little cul-de-sac had been turned inside out. And this, I thought as the officers led the men away, was why you never underestimate the power of small details. A smear no bigger than a pea, a bush camera in the right place, and the patience to build a record. Those were the things that changed the trajectory of the fight. This was no longer a private dispute. It had become an official inquiry into a network of intimidation, and I knew we had finally forced the game into daylight. He didn't raise his voice. "Ma'am, your so-called security team just committed assault and we have it on video. They're being arrested. This is harassment." Karen screamed, her fury breaking through the night. "I'll have your badge for this. I know the chief of police." Detective Miller's expression didn't change. He looked at her with a kind of quiet steel. "I don't think you do," he said calmly. And then he walked past her, right up to her front door, and knocked. A moment later, a bewildered Mr. Carson appeared. Behind him, shuffling nervously, was Kyle. The detective spoke with firm authority. "We have a warrant for your son's arrest. Kyle Carson, you're being taken into custody for tampering with U.S. mail." Kyle's face went pale. He looked at the flashing police lights, then at his uncle in handcuffs, and his bravado collapsed. He was cuffed right there on his own front porch. Karen let out a sound that was half scream, half sob, the sound of a fortress crumbling. But the collapse wasn't finished. A dark sedan I hadn't noticed before pulled up. A woman stepped out in a professional suit, briefcase in hand. She introduced herself calmly. "Mrs. Carson, I'm with Child Protective Services. Given the circumstances of your son's arrest and the ongoing investigation into this household, we need to ask you and your husband a few questions." That was the true kill shot. The arrests were bad enough, but this was personal annihilation. Her power, her whole suburban empire, had been built on appearances. And now, with CPS at her door and the whole neighborhood watching, that image shattered. She stood frozen in her driveway, face ashen. As her world collapsed in the glow of red and blue lights, the arrests were only the beginning. The real battle was still ahead, dismantling her throne, the HOA itself. 2 days later, the community clubhouse was packed. It was the most crowded HOA meeting in Maplecrest court history. Every seat was taken, neighbors lined the walls, and the air hummed with tension. At the front table sat the board members, pale and tight-lipped, and in the center, wearing a perfectly tailored suit, sat Karen Carson. She looked every bit the president she wanted to be, polished, composed, but the mask was cracking. Dark circles under her eyes betrayed sleepless nights, and the twitch of her jaw told the truth her words could not. She tried to open the meeting with her usual polished control, speaking about unfortunate misunderstandings and the need for unity. But this time, nobody was buying it. I had requested time on the agenda to speak about security incidents. She couldn't deny me without exposing her hypocrisy, so when she called my name, the room went silent. Tina set up our laptop and projector. My heart hammered, but it wasn't fear, it was clarity. "Good evening," I said steadily. "My name is Jake Miller. My family and I have lived here for 5 years. We love this community, but lately we haven't felt safe in our own home. And I know we're not the only ones." I looked out over the crowd. I saw nods, tense faces, silent agreement. We've been told the HOA exists to protect property values. But what is the value of a home where you live in fear? Fear of fines, fear of intimidation, fear of one person who twists rules into weapons. Karen slammed her gavel. "Mr. Miller, this is not the forum for personal grievances." "Yes, Karen," I said deliberately, using her name. "I do have a point, and I have evidence." Tina hit a key and the projector came alive. The first video played. Kyle creeping into the Wilsons' yard, testing their door, then hopping the fence into mine. Gasps echoed. Next came the footage from my home security camera, Kyle inside my house. Murmurs rippled. Then, a cell phone video of him shoving Max at the bus stop. Anger spread through the room like fire. Finally, the wildlife cam footage appeared, Kyle stealing the letter from my mailbox. Someone whispered loudly, "That's a federal crime." Karen jumped to her feet, shouting, "This is an invasion of my son's privacy. He's a minor." I didn't flinch. Is this about protecting a minor? Or about protecting your control? Tina played the final clip. Frank Carson and his thug pounding on my door, threatening before shoving me. Then came the flashing lights and handcuffs. The room exploded. The dam of silence and fear burst. Neighbors stood and shouted their own stories. Mrs. Gable, fined $2,000 because her husband's wheelchair ramp wasn't the right shade of brown. Mr. Chun, nearly losing his home over an illegal lien for a basketball hoop. One by one, the people Karen had bullied for years stood up, voices trembling but defiant. The board sat stunned as the truth spilled out. Karen pounded her gavel, face purple with rage. "Order! This meeting is adjourned." But no one listened. The gavel was just wood now. The power had shifted away from her into the hands of the people she had ruled by fear. Her reign was over. The fallout came fast. The board, terrified of being dragged down with her, held an emergency session. They voted Karen out as president and froze her access to HOA accounts. They brought in an independent forensic accountant, a retired IRS agent who treated spreadsheets like crime scenes. What he uncovered was staggering. Shell companies tied to Karen's relatives. Landscaping billed at triple cost. Pool repairs that never happened. Consulting fees to her own name. Hundreds of thousands of dollars siphoned from the community. The report went straight to the district attorney. Combined with Detective Miller's case file, it was a hammer blow. Charges: fraud, embezzlement, grand larceny. The IRS opened their own case for tax evasion. Her allies crumbled. Her family faced charges. And when she tried one last desperate move, enforcing her illegal liens in court, it backfired spectacularly. The judge, after reading the forensic report in stony silence, dismissed every lien with prejudice, sanctioned her lawyer, and ordered her to pay every family's legal fees. The gavel came down like a gunshot. Her last weapon was gone. 6 months later, Maplecrest Court was different. Peaceful. Real. The bylaws Karen had twisted were burned in a community bonfire. Kids played street hockey without fear of fines. Neighbors talked, laughed, and lived again. Tina and I sat on a new porch swing, iced tea in hand, watching Max play. The fear in him was gone. He missed a shot, laughed, and kept going. Ordinary moments. The best kind. Karen had pled out to avoid a longer sentence. Her house was sold to pay restitution and taxes. A young family lived there now, waving hello as they settled into a fresh start. Our share of the settlement arrived in the mail. We covered the bills, then donated the rest to help at-risk kids. Turning something ugly into something good felt right. I leaned back, chains creaking, and took Tina's hand. After months of battles, the answer was clear. How far will a man go to protect his family? As far as he must, no farther. You don't mimic the bully. You don't bend the law. You stay steady. You build the record. You fight for peace, not revenge. And in the end, peace was exactly what we won. The sound of kids laughing, sticks clattering on pavement, a dog barking down the street. Those were our victory. Not Karen's downfall, but our life reclaimed. The war was over, and peace had never sounded so sweet.